Begin. So today we're going to have a conversation with Sipping Tea from BBZ. We want to firstly welcome you and everyone for listening. It's really nice to have you all with us. And before we start the conversation, we have some information to share. So my name is Nisia Marsh and my pronouns she and her. And today I'm wearing a long sleeve turquoise top with a blue shirt underneath and some jewelry, like silver jewelry.
Hi from me as well, and welcome. My name is Orla Nohtanen. My pronouns are they and them. I'm wearing a black t-shirt with some white text on it, and I'm a white person with short, faded seafoam color hair and black rimmed glasses, and I have a gold earring and a gold necklace.
And if Sipping Tea could say to everyone what you're wearing.
Hey everybody, I'm Sipping Tea. I am currently sat in my garden and I'm wearing a purple crop top with some lovely gold crystals and some gold rimmed glasses. My hair is looking very out of bed and freeform dreadlocky. And I've also got a nice septum piercing that is also gold.
Yes. And your pronouns?
My pronouns are they, them.
They, them.
Thank you.
Yes. And we also have our colleague Katie here who's working in the background on the technical sides of everything. But you might hear some sounds or questions. So we're Feminist Culture House. We're an intersectional feminist organisation working with and for underrepresented artists. And we're based in Helsinki, Finland.
Sorry. So we're having this conversation with Sipping Tea as part of our exhibition that we've curated for Stoa Culture Center in Helsinki as well, called What's the Use of Intersectionality? And through a number of new commissioned artworks in the windows, courtyard and flagpoles of Stoa, we've invited artists to explore different ways of communicating and encountering intersectional feminism.
So today we're speaking with Sipping Tea, who's from BBZ, which is a art and DJ collective based in South London with roots in nightlife and club culture and dedicated to creating a network and amplifying the experiences of queer women, trans folk and non-binary Black and POC in all aspects of their work. BBZ also provides a physical and online platforms for this specific community.
And Sipping Tea is a social, sound and moving image artist based in London, UK and Kingston, Jamaica. And the core thread throughout their practice is supporting the expansion of queer women, trans and non-binary people of Black ancestry, using the correlation between warm fellowship, sound and visuals as an alluring call to finding home within, encouraging us to slow down, exist in the moment, that it's okay to be witnessed and to be reminded of your validity beyond the fast pace designed by capitalism. And also this conversation will be visually documented by artist Kiva and Dale, and you can find their work later on our website and social media platforms. So we're really happy to have you Sipping Tea with us, and we really admire the work that you're doing and are looking forward to hearing more about it.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just begin with the first question, which is, what is BBZ?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be part of this conversation. When you sent through the questions, I was like, yes, this is going to be really juicy. So I'm really happy to be here. So to start off, BBZ started off as a club night, and it was just a bunch of people that were like, I want to go out, I want to meet friends, I want to have somewhere to show my artwork, but I just don't really feel like I fit in. And it was really that simple. I don't think that we had thought about the politics of what creating space was in the moment that we were imagining it. So my co-founder and myself, we just finished university and it hadn't been a great experience. We were both queer people of colour, and a lot of our work was just not understood by everybody else that was on our courses or just in the educational spaces. And I think we felt very isolated, felt very frustrated, felt like, oh, maybe our work isn't good enough. You know, when you're being told consistently throughout your time at university that what you're creating doesn't make sense, or people just aren't giving you any critique on it because they just don't get it, it then, you know, you start internalizing what it is that you're making. So that was a huge kind of pull for us to create this space. And then on top of that, just wanting to be around other queerdos and wanting to be around other people that perhaps didn't have the opportunity to go to uni, but are still creators, and giving space for that. Like, I know that you DJ in your bedroom, come and DJ in the club so that we can all dance and share the vibes with you. I know that you write poetry at home, you share it on your Instagram sometimes. Why don't you just share it in live space so that people can actually enjoy it? Like, it was very much that. So that's where we started. And kind of as time was going on, momentum was building, people were really enjoying the space. We were having more and more collaborators coming through the space. And I think it just kind of gave us the confidence to be like, oh, perhaps we can start moving into more artistic spaces. We can start creating installations and doing things that are more traditionally moving in environments that are not the club, basically, showing our artwork in spaces that are a little bit more accessible to lots of different people and different age groups. And it was just like a kind of simple evolution from there. As we were growing and understanding what we wanted from ourselves, our needs were changing. So that's how we ended up progressing more into the art world.
Nice. Nice.
That's really nice to hear. And also this like way of centering different kinds of voices has been something that we've been working with. And I guess like one of the reasons why I reached out to you and hear more about your work. And we were wondering about if you could talk a little bit about like because it's a community, Babes is a community, and it's like about like how you keep the community relationships happening and how you're working with each other.
I think that when you're already working with marginalized folk, like everything that we do centers queer, trans and non-binary people of color and Black ancestry. And that already kind of fosters a sense of union, fosters a sense of like friendship, which means that, you know, you're attracted to what you see in, if you see yourself in other people, you're attracted to it, you kind of stick to it, which meant that there was quite an organic sense of community. And I put that in air quotation marks, because I think that my understanding of community has evolved a lot from when we initially had started it. I think that when we initially started, we had a lot of people in a space together who really liked the idea of family and really liked the idea of trying to create family, but I don't know if we necessarily understood what that meant in the initial stages. So it was almost like an accidental community was formed. And then as we were understanding what it is to be in close proximity to others, we understood that community requires more than just being in space with other people. It requires accountability, it requires listening, it requires like understanding and compassion on lots of different levels. So I feel like I've gone slightly off what the initial question was, but it's been actually very complex to try to maintain and grow a community of people. It's not as simple as just creating the space and leaving people to it. You have to be very active in nurturing everybody's individual needs, because already, even though we're a group of people who share much in common, there are so many intersections within the intersections that we exist in. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely something we also like try and do and think about every time we make like a new project or think of new ideas. Like, how can we ensure that the community that began with us is still there and like their voices are heard, but also grow the different, like ensure that you're getting like the intersections of the different communities as well. Like, I think it's a process, and it's a long process, but it's worth it.
Absolutely, yeah. And like so much of that process, it makes you learn about your own intersections. Like your community is a mirror for you to be able to understand what it is that you actually need. There are perhaps even things about yourself that you don't recognize until you're in a space of other people who are expressing what their needs are. So it's this continual evolution of what community is and who you are within that community.
Yeah.
And is that something that, like, when we think about communication within like your collective and these different understandings of community, like, is it something that you have to like, because we realized that we have to like always keep talking about it, like how are we communicating, and we have to update that on like a regular basis. And is that something that you have to encounter as well, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think that communication, as difficult as it can be, is so essential to being in close proximity to anybody. And throughout our journey, I must say at the beginnings, our communication was pretty rough, we were all practicing how to communicate with each other and expressing what our needs are, because I also think that marginalized folk are not used to speaking up and saying what it is that they require. So if you've got a group of people who already find it difficult to be forthcoming about their needs because they've never been given the option of saying what their needs are, then it makes communicating very complex and difficult. Because what do you even start communicating about if you don't know how to exercise the needs, like exercise your own needs, or, you know, start even interrogating what your own needs are. So I think that over time, as a collective, because it started off with just 2 of us and then it kind of expanded into like 7, and then it dropped back down and it came back up. Over time, as we were building connections and trust with each other, it meant that we were able to start communicating more honestly about what it is that we needed as a community and what direction we wanted to go in, and what was required of that. So it's like constant interrogation of where you're at personally and what that means for the collective. So yes, communication is a very, very huge part of like everything that we had to do. And it's just it's about also being able to receive critique and receive, you know, any kind of situations that may be in conflict with what you're feeling like. Yeah, definitely.
So maybe my next question is about even within the community, how are you fostering partnerships and collaborations with people outside of that community, but ensuring that your community is still like safe in a way?
I think that, so I suppose there are 2 different ways that like we would always look at partnerships. And there are partnerships, like for example, what we're doing today, where, you know, it's we're kind of, we have adjacent but very similar missions in terms of like uplifting the voices of marginalized people, but we're in different contexts. And partnerships like that were always things that we really, really welcomed and loved, and were open to just like figuring it out. And we were all on a pretty equal playing field. But then I suppose when it comes to partnerships with institutions or with very heteronormative white spaces or just very capitalistic spaces. It required a lot of interrogation of our own like internalized capitalism and internalized heteronormativity and our understandings of success. And I think it's really, really difficult to find that balance, especially if you yourself are a marginalized person and you're trying to sustain yourself and you're being offered capital. It means that it puts you in a position where you're like, do I prioritize my needs over my like community's needs? How do I ensure that I'm still being looked after while standing firm in my beliefs and what it is that I need? And I think that is a really, really difficult line to tread, especially when you don't have financial security because you're a grassroots organization.
Yeah.
And that's something that we've always like really battled with. And I think it really started like coming to the forefronts of our minds as we were understanding how people would tokenize us. Like we didn't create the collective in order to have any kind of mainstream attention or mainstream, you know, anything kind of coming in. It was very much about us just doing what we were doing for us. But we couldn't ignore the fact that we were getting mainstream attention. And with that, it meant that we had to address how we were engaging with it.
Yeah.
But it's a hard line to tread. I think that it's something that with experience and with experience, you're just able to understand when you say no and when you say yes to certain things. But money is always at the core of making decisions like that, which is very complex. If you're like, either my organization sinks because we don't have any finances, or I'm able to find some kind of a compromise in how we can work alongside something that doesn't fully fit with what it is that we're trying to do. And especially when you're coming from the clubbing world, you're not necessarily coming from like an academic space.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah. It's definitely different to here, because here in Finland, there's like a grant system. So many arts organizations can kind of get funding, or individual artists can get funding through the grants. But I know in the UK, it's very different. Like obviously there's a few main big bodies, but how were you like, was Babes Nights always paid for, like ticketed, and then from that you would build and build and build?
Yeah, our nights were ticketed. I also was working full time, and other members of the collective were also working full time doing their other jobs. So even though we were able to make money every now and then from our club nights, like our ticketing was always affordable for the people that we're promoting it to, which meant that normally it was enough to pay the DJs, pay the venue, and covered all of the basic costs. But it was pretty much us just doing side hustle jobs in order to feed into what our passion project was. Yeah,
I feel like that's something that we're really like constantly thinking about, because we have a grant at the moment, but then obviously that's going to run out at some point, and how to sustain, and what are the compromises that we have to make, because they're going to be there. And I think it's an important word to keep in mind, but then also like balance around somehow. And yeah, it's nice to hear about how you've been working with it. We were thinking if you could talk a little bit about the alternative grad show.
Yes,
you started it, and why, and can you say also a bit about what it is?
Yes, definitely. So the alternative graduate show was started in 2017 because we'd done a project with the Tate about where we'd kind of taken over a space and done a large installation looking at queer Black people in the UK. And part of that project was that we started a directory called the Black Book. And it was just an online directory where we listed off all of our favorite artists and different people who were Black and queer. And off of the back of that, we started getting invited to speak about the club night that we'd created at different institutions. And we had been invited to the RA, the Royal Academy, and we were very, very baffled and confused. We were like, we just throw parties. Why are we here? You know, like, we just run a club night, but okay, cool. And we did this talk at the RA, and it was very, very interesting because we'd been invited by a queer Black student, and afterwards after the talk, we were having some wine and just talking about our experiences of going through arts universities. And she was expressing to us that she was just really concerned about graduating because, again, work wasn't understood by other people, having to show work alongside artists whose work is in direct opposition to your political views. And like, it was just she just was not looking forward to being in that space. And then we were all just sharing our experiences and was just like, wouldn't it be amazing if we just had our own graduate show? Wouldn't it be so beautiful to be in a space where everybody understood what the fuck was going on? It was like, you just get me. You understand that my work isn't just about my Blackness and my queerness. My work is actually just about me as a human being. So that ignited in all of us just the idea of like, why don't we just make the Black Book something that is IRL, not just online? And that's how we got the ball rolling. We didn't have any funding. We didn't have any like experience of putting on art shows. Like I studied fashion photography at university, and the other Babes co-founder, Naeem Davis, had studied film. And then it meant that, yes, we had artistic backgrounds, but in terms of like producing an art show, wasn't really our forte. But we were just like, we can produce a club night, so we can produce an art show. We know how to we know people, we can figure this out. And it was just definitely us just kind of trying to reclaim what it is to graduate. Like, I feel like a lot of children of immigrants are told you have to go to university, but don't do art at university because that's not a real degree. And I think the idea of being able to graduate and feel proud of the process and feel like you're being seen and feel like you're being understood is so precious, because you put in 3, 4, 5 years of your life and you deserve to be able to walk away and feel proud of what it is that you've created. So that was the thinking behind it. And we decided to just assemble a load of people who also had that same vision for having a beautiful graduating experience. And we put out an open call for people who were queer, trans, non-binary, of Black ancestry, any age. The first graduate show, it was for people who had graduated from an institution. And the second graduate show, we were just like, fuck that. Why are we then going back into institution? If you've got a body of work that spans 3 years, come through. So we put an open call out, and then we had 10 slots available. We got a selection panel of artists that we all respect who are queer and Black. And they helped us to choose who would be part of the show. And then we just worked together alongside the artist and a curator, a guest curator, to just build it all communally. And it's very much a I think that was the first time that I really understood the idea of community working together to build something that we were all going to benefit from. Everybody really engaging with each other's work, seeing how everybody can like feed in and help. So that was kind of the basis of it. It was very DIY, we're just going to try and do it. And we managed to do it. We created a newspaper from it. We ran workshops that were, again, it was just lots of spaces where we invited people to just be like, come and talk. Have you got a project that you're working on? Let's sit down in a big circle. You've got 5 minutes to talk about your project and everybody will feed back. Or if you just want to talk about how you're feeling today, come through. Like, it was, I suppose, just about removing this like stiffness that comes with art spaces. So just because you're creating work which is to be seen in a certain space doesn't mean it needs to be stiff. Doesn't mean that people who are not artists can't roll through. Like, we had a lot of people from the community, like the surrounding community, because we hosted the show in Peckham. So people who just ran shops that were like along the high street, we'd just invite them to come through and engage with it. Lots of children were coming through. And it just meant that it created this really nurturing and fertile like environment for people to share that didn't feel hierarchical. It felt very is it egalitarian? That's the word, just like equal. So yeah, that's the graduate show. Yeah.
So amazing. It sounds like it was a dream, and then it just sounds like a dream as well when you describe it. It's so cool.
Yeah, it was really beautiful. And, you know, I think being able to uplift other artists and use what clout, again in inverted air commas, we had amassed as a club night to then use it for uplifting other artists was really important for us. Like, as a club night, we've been able to gain this following from, I don't know, like certain publications, and all of that is great, but what use is it if it's not being able to actually uplift other people's careers? And the fact that we were able to create partnerships with different publications which could then push other people's work to wider audiences was really important for us. So just trying to use the resources that we had and merging those two worlds to do something more constructive with it, rather than just being like, yeah, we've got all of these followers on Instagram, or it's useless really if it's not actually pushing something that is more generative.
Yeah, I think like I think that's a nice way to look at the alternative graduate show, and how it's like how you can make these partnerships by like linking media coverage of the artist. I think that's really nice and good and very smart move.
Yeah.
So as the exhibition is called What's the Use of Intersectionality, we wanted to ask you that question. What do you think is the use of intersectionality from your like perspective?
I think that intersectionality is about leveling the playing field. I think that the structures that we currently have in place are very, very messed up, shitty structures, and it's not about like replicating those structures with an intersectional view. So it's not just about inverting those same structures, it's about deconstructing the structures that currently exist and trying to create a more equal way of existing for all humans, not just inverting the current structures, because I just don't think that they work. So yeah, you can't be out here just having people stepping on top of people, stepping on top of people. That doesn't work. So let's not replicate that. Let's try and completely deconstruct it and create something equal. So I suppose that is the use of intersectionality. That's the ultimate goal of it for me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
And yeah, I think like it, at least in this context of like Finnish art field, it's very much a buzzword at the moment. So then it's like feels really important to hear from people who've been you know, centering it in your work, to hear from like how you work with it in practice instead of it just being like a label that can be put on a exhibition or something.
Absolutely.
Because I think, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, off of the back of what you just said, it not just being a label, because it's very easy for us to throw words around. It's very easy for us to say this is intersectional, but then what actually are the actions that are being taken post you saying this is intersectional? So yeah, what you're saying about the labels and it just being able to act as a buzzword is fantastic, because language is important, but action is equally as important. So yeah.
Here.
Yes.
We had this dreaming question for you also, like what would the art world look like? We're thinking of the art world, but you could also think of that more broadly if it was run by intersectional feminists.
Well, I feel like capitalism deconstructs it all. So like even if we were able to have an art world that was run by intersectional feminists, if capitalism is in the equation, then it will always end up kind of creating this horrible tension that destabilizes whatever good we're trying to do. So it's, in one way, I think that if everything was run by intersectional feminists, there would be far more compassion and understanding and patience and desire for uplifting people's voices and less kind of hierarchy. But I also just feel like at the core, capitalism just fucks us all over. And I don't know, maybe intersectionality is something that can help to cure capitalism, again in inverted quotation marks, but yeah, I think that anything that is a step towards more compassion, more patience, and more understanding of different experiences is always going to be the direction that we should be going towards.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a big question. So
it is.
You had a lovely answer.
So we were also talking with some other conversationalists, and our other question is, how do you deal with wanting to bring your work and politics to the front, but also not becoming the face of, for example, queer, trans art, or the face of anything? How do you work with those two together?
Gosh. I feel like with the current setup of our society, it's so difficult to, it's like this weird dance that you have to do. You're always dodging some kind of tokenization or some kind of like, this is the new in thing, or this is the new cool thing. And I feel like that our current structures are very based around capitalizing on something that is exotic or different or alternative, which makes it, which does make it very hard to navigate if you just want to be able to do what you're doing without creating a product of yourself. I think that having an awareness of that is the best starting point, so that you don't fall into any traps, you don't fall into any visibility traps. And having an awareness that you are currently a commodity to a lot of people, and you have to, if you don't acknowledge that, then you can't avoid it. And I suppose just remembering that, like, your voice is so important and your comfort is always a priority. So you are like, you can speak up and just be like, these are the conditions that I will agree to be part of whatever it is that somebody wants you to be a part of. And just remembering that, like, we have power as marginalized folks, and that our voices are powerful, and that we can ask for what we need. So I suppose it's just that reminder of, I can ask for what I need whenever I need it, and I'm not going to compromise on my comfort for somebody else's. And then I suppose just trying to navigate every situation based off of that, and seeing what you have capacity for, because also that fluctuates. There might be one moment where you're like, do you know what, I feel this is important for me to be visible in what I'm doing, and in another moment you're like, I don't have capacity for that, so I'm not going to do it. And just like not getting sucked into the vortex of having to always have capacity for everything. And just remembering that everything is dual, everything has an ebb and a flow, and everything isn't just like simple. You have to always, because we shift constantly, which means that how that you respond to things is constantly going to shift. So there's not really like a one way of approaching it. And we're humans, and it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to, go back on things. Like, I suppose that's how I'm trying to approach things now, just with an awareness of what's up.
I think we tried as well here. We did this project with the terms and conditions, and we like sat down with some artists and people and sat and wrote, what would our terms and conditions be? Like, what would our boundaries be? What do we need at this moment for like each collaboration? So that sounds really similar.
Yeah. It's empowering to also just have things written down, so that like you can remember what it is that you have agreed to in this moment, or what it is that you feel that you have capacity for in this moment. So having things like groups where you're sitting down and writing what your boundaries are, I think is absolutely essential.
I also love that reminder from you to like remember that we have the right to change our minds and change as people, and just have change in our lives. And I think like that's also something that's difficult, as I think like as an artist, or like, I don't know, as a trans person, to just like remember that like, oh yeah, I can actually like decide that I don't need this now, and now I can't do this now. And I feel like artists always really, like you said earlier, like when you haven't learned to like voice your needs, it's also the voicing of a no is really difficult.
Yeah. I think our final question is around, we know that Babes has kind of disbanded over the last year because of COVID and other factors. So we wanted to speak to you about this in relation to the work that you do as a collective, and the long-term support that collectives need. So kind of what kind of structures, so this is like resources, structures, would be helpful in supporting the type of work that you as a collective have done in the past. What do you think would be required in order to continue the long-term support of marginalised folk within the community?
I think that what we were saying at the beginning about communicating, so like having conversations like this, is really important, because it wasn't until we spoke the other day where you told me about how things operate in Finland, and I was like, whoa, that is so different. I had no idea. So being able to exchange information among ourselves, and, you know, the fact that you have the resources to be able to invite people to have conversations, is really, really powerful. And being able, within our little ways, to redistribute resources and information among ourselves, I think is so great. And I think that also, you know, the internet has definitely helped with that. And I think COVID has also pushed people to share information online very differently. So I actually hope that that will continue in many ways. And then I suppose in more of like in a more long-term way, financial support is always a priority. And I think access to finances, and like democratizing access to finances, because the hoops that you have to jump through in order to acquire money, it just is insane. And it doesn't allow for people who don't speak certain academic languages to even start going through that process. So I think that new systems of funding, especially in the UK, is definitely important. I think that just support from intergenerational conversations, I also think, is a really huge factor, because very often collectives are born and there hasn't been much documentation of older generations of collectives of people, or people just perhaps don't have access to research or don't do the research, which means that we're always starting from zero, and we're not looking at all of the work that has been done previously and all of the mistakes and the lessons that we can then build on from that, which then means that we're just constantly in this kind of cycle of not being able to push beyond. So I think that conversations with our elders about what has been done and the ways it was done, the different structures, is really important. I think that people prioritizing their own individual mental health and having access to mental health services, and understanding that if you're going to have a collective of people who have all got poor mental health, then the collective's probably going to have poor mental health. And it's really important for us to look after ourselves, because it all starts with yourself. And then if you're in union with other people who are looking after themselves, it's always going to be a more fruitful product or union of people. I don't know, there are so many different aspects, and I feel like finances, of course, are essential because we live in a capitalist society. But I also just think people having access to information for free and having access to mental health services for free, and not thinking that you have to burn yourself out in order to be successful, and like relearning our attitudes towards what success is, and like relearning our attitudes towards what like putting work in is, at the cost of our own like health. So I'm not sure if I answered the exact question that you asked.
You did.
But you know, there's a variety of factors. But I just think it's important to give people access to information and not have information that is just like using language that is just absolutely inaccessible to like working class people and people from different countries and people with different like abilities. It's just, yeah.
Thank you. I think maybe
a very, very final question. Like, what are your plans and hopes and dreams for the rest of this year?
Gosh, for the rest of this year, my hopes and plans and dreams. I'm feeling really encouraged by how people seem to be like choosing themselves in this moment. I feel like people have, you know, been pretty forced with COVID to reflect on what they actually want and desire for the future. And I also feel very lucky to be in a position where I can actually think about it in that way, because I know that a lot of people are not in that position. And I feel like it's really nice to see people being slightly more in tune with themselves as a result of having time with themselves. And I really hope that that is something that continues. For me personally, my hopes are just to continue to learn more about myself and learn more about using my voice and vocalizing that to other people, because I've always found that very difficult. And I think that this period of time has taught me how important it is to say what I need. So I want to try and continue to say what I need and continue to remember that I always have a choice. So I feel like that is a very, I think it's quite simple, but a very impactful hope that I have for myself moving forward, because I think it will directly impact a lot of different work decisions and the way that I choose to build community and choose to like be accountable for my own decisions. And yeah, that's what I would say.
amazing. Thank you so much for sharing space with us. It's been really nice and insightful speaking with you and learning new things.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been wonderful, and I think it's so important what you're doing.
Thanks. We hope to be in touch in some way, whatever it might be, and hope that you have a wonderful morning.
Yes.
Yes. Thanks so much.
Great. Bye.
Bye. Bye.